federal government has asked COVID-19 treatment centers across the country to prepare for reopening on fears that the country might be on the verge of a second wave of the pandemic. Some of the centers were shut after the country recorded a decline in cases. Speaking at the briefing of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 yesterday, the Minister of Health, Dr. Osagie Ehanire, said he had directed health workers to be on red alert. In his words, quote, "We are seeing the increase in number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the last few days, and we have frequently alluded this to in recent times. This rightly suggests that we might just be on the verge of a second wave of this pandemic. Last week, we recorded 1,843 cases as against 1,235 2 weeks before that and 1,126 a week before that," end of quote. In the meantime, Chief of Army Staff Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, General Officers Commanding, Field Officers Commanding, and other participants at the Chief of Army Staff Conference have gone into isolation following the death of the GOC 6th Division Nigerian Army Port Harcourt Major General Olubunmi Irefi, who died as a result of complications arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. General Irefi's death caused panic in military circles, especially among those who attended the conference, most of whom have undergone tests to ascertain their status. Quite a very sad one for the Nigerian military there. You know, a lot of them are in isolation now. We just pray for the repose of the souls of General Irefi. What an irreparable loss to have at this time like this.
Honestly, it's terrible. And, you know, commiserations to his family. It's tragic news. Yeah. And also sad for the Chief of Army Staff, General Buratai. No parent wants to have to announce that they cannot attend their child's wedding, which is what he's done because he's in isolation. His son's wedding is around the corner. So, but then that's the responsible thing to do at this point. And also, kudos to the armed forces for, you know, cancelling that conference. It's the only thing to do. And also to the Minister of Health for not waiting until the second wave actually hits. He's trying to be proactive rather than reactive. But what can I say about the second wave? We know South Africa is in the grip of a second wave of COVID-19. And from what we've all observed around us, how, you know, relaxed people are, especially as, what they call it? Dirty December, what they call it. yeah. Especially as those festivities start and what have you. It's not much of a leap to imagine that Nigeria will see a second wave, unfortunately. But I think we do have to continue to urge the public to wear their masks, maintain their hand hygiene, and maintain their social distancing so that we prevent fatalities. Because we have to remember, Africa really has been spared to a great extent, but there are still people losing their lives to COVID-19. It's not to be toyed with.
Well, I think it is a good development that COVID-19 is back on the top of the table in terms of public discourse in Nigeria. Because for a while after the relaxation of the restrictions, it's like everybody just went back to their normal ways. And now we have been receiving some kind of rude awakening. First, in terms of the escalation in the infection rates. The last time we had a very high rate was reported in August 22, when there was 601 cases. But in the last 1 week, the cases have been going up. The authorities have been recording over 500 cases. The last that was reported this week was, in fact, about 501. Before then, it was 474. So the numbers have been going on gradually. Well, the usual argument is to say, well, maybe there is more testing. But what we have also seen is that there isn't enough testing. At the press briefing by the Presidential Task Force, it was pointed out that only 4 states, Lagos, Kaduna, FCT, and one other state, you know, account for about 64% of the testing rates in the country. About 4 states, yes, try to improve a little, but they have recorded in those states only 1,000 testing, you know, efforts per day. And then you have about 17 states, you know, where there has been no improvement. And then in some states, in the remaining states, no testing is being carried out, either because the governors in those states do not, you know, accept that COVID-19 is real or not, or they assume, like many Nigerians, that COVID-19 has disappeared. So that problem is there. And so when the chairman of the Presidential Task Force, Boss Mustafa, who doubles as Secretary to the Government of the Federation, warns that the second wave is here, and his position is corroborated by Chikwe Iwekwazo, the Director General of the Center for Disease Control, then of course they have very strong justification. And what the two of them are saying is that the states need to do more testing. That is one, and we agree with them. The fact that a Major General in the Nigerian Army, Major General Ehanire, yes, you are right, we commiserate with his family, also came down as a result of COVID-19. Again, shows that this thing called COVID is very real, and it has not disappeared. There may have been studies saying Africans, yes, are resilient. We have something in our DNA that makes us, defensible against any kind of a virus or disease. But we have seen that that's not an absolute assessment. We also still have cases. In South Africa, in the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape and the Gauteng province, they have a serious issue in terms of escalation in numbers. They've declared second wave. Nigeria now is beginning to talk about second wave. And I agree with Boss Mustafa, the point he made that, look, we still have to take those precautions. Those non-pharmaceutical guidelines still have to be followed. And he went a step further to say that religious organizations are part of the problem. If you look at religious units, churches and mosques, and, I don't know, even maybe the traditionalists, people were given guidelines. They were given prescriptions. If your church is to open, it must not spend more than 1 hour per service. People must follow certain procedures. Names should be documented. Nobody has enforced that. And we have always on this program talked about the need for enforcement. So Boss Mustafa is now talking about enforcement by subnational entities. That is the states and the local councils. But who is going to enforce it? When even the religious leaders themselves say they do not believe in COVID, that holy water and anointing oil and the blood of Jesus will solve the problem. This is a curious situation where people are more Catholic than the Pope. Even in Italy, precautions have been taken. Even at the Vatican City, precautions have been taken. But you have religious leaders in Nigeria who are saying something different. Now, we have also been told that the isolation centers will be reopened. Now, makes sense, because if there is a second wave, then those isolation centers will have to come back. But those isolation centers, in what condition are they now? We have a bad tradition of maintaining things in Nigeria. I can bet if you check many of those isolation centers, either they will have been looted or they will have been allowed to go to waste. The third major point that has been raised by Boss Mustafa has to do with vaccines. He says that Nigeria will begin to focus on vaccines, to quote him correctly, in the next months or in the next year. No. The issue about vaccine development, establishment of vaccination vaccination hubs is an urgent matter. In other parts of the world, they are already dealing with it. So it is wrong to say in the next coming months or years. We hope that when that Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 presents its report, as Boss Mustafa says, in 2 weeks to the President, that more concrete actions will be announced. And if the need arises to further lock down certain parts of Nigeria, I think that the President should not hesitate in giving that order in cooperation with the subnational entities.
All right, well said there, Dr. Abati. Former chairman of the Nigerian Pension Reform Tax Team, Abdulrasheed Maina, collapsed in a federal high court in Nigeria's capital, where he's facing charges for money laundering. On Wednesday this week, the former pension fund chief told the court they had no case to answer, and shortly afterwards, on Thursday, he slumped a few minutes into his trial. Anayo Adibe, Maina's new lawyer, told Justin Okunaban that he will file a formal case to argue his client's case of no case submission. Collapsing. I just hope Maina is better now and is well, because collapsing is quite very grave, That's the sad scene of what we're seeing today in Nigeria.
Are you being facetious? Because I don't see anything grave about that, apart from just the total lack of dignity. That's the tragedy here. Can they all stop collapsing? Did he go to the Ponde acting school? I mean, what is this taking of a dive every 5 seconds? It's really undignified.
But it's not today. Others have collapsed in the past.
Yes, that's the thing that they do here. It's really undignified, I have to say. The thing about it, the EFCC closed their case. It was his counsel's turn to submit his no-case submission. But instead, we're treated to this kind of a spectacle. It's unfortunate.
Well, I know that the natural response would be to say, or maybe the accused person was staging a drama in the in the face of the court, which is a technical phrase. And the suspicion in that regard, the comedic characterization of that incident is as a result of the fact that Nigerians in the not too distant past have witnessed similar examples, either with Senator Dino Melaye or Professor Ponde, whom you mentioned, or some other persons who went to the court on stretchers, claiming that they are ill and all that. But let us not rule out the fact also that, a person going through trial is going through a very emotional moment. To be fair, in some cases, the person may have maybe a medical condition. When Mena was brought back from the jail, if you watch the video of his arrival, some people noted that he was limping. So the question is that, does he have a medical condition? So don't let's jump to the conclusion that this is another theater.
You don't have to. I have.
And,
you can be more charitable in your assessments. I have come to my conclusions.
I'm just expressing an opinion.
Yes.
And I will go a step further and say that, look, it is part of the responsibility of the state to make sure that persons are in a fit and proper condition to be able to stand trial. So if he slumped, or if he fainted, if he collapsed, I hope that he will be given the necessary access to quality medical care, and all of that will be factored in to make sure that he's in a good state to be able to stand trial. And it's also within his rights, as an accused person, to take the option of saying, I have no case to answer.
Yes.
And the court, it is for the court to determine, as we have seen in several precedents. But the drama of it, entertains Nigerians. And overnight, I've seen a lot of people excited about drama. I even saw on Facebook, one man collapsed because he said his wife had not given him dinner and that Nigerians should come to his rescue. So Nigerians have a sense of humor, and they will take that sense of humor out of everything. But let's deal with the process, the judicial process. If he's ill, he deserves access.
You are not more charitable than I am.
But most importantly for me, aside from the drama, what keeps me up at night is to see pensioners on lines waiting to get their pensions, and they faint and die truly on the line. I think that's the
to judge.
No, I'm not judging him. That's what concerns me.
I reserve the right to my opinion.
What do its work?
Yeah, will do its work, but I have my own opinion.
What concerns me,
I wonder if it was limping when he
importantly,
was full of vim and vigor when he jumped bail. He wasn't limping then.
What concerns me?
Did you see him then?
I bet you he was not.
No, but what concerns me is the fact that we have people that have worked their lives entirely for this country, and to get their pension in the end, they wait on long queues, and some of them collapse and die in those queues.
We've seen that, haven't we?
And we've seen, and that's what concerns me the most. So that's the picture I have in my head. But
well, Mena himself is probably also now a pensioner, having left the service.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, it's a community.
Yeah.
But let due process be followed, and let justice be done, and let the accused person have his rights.
Yeah. All right, that's all on news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Ruth Zudiri, Michael Wilson, Adesso Amaro, Aaron Akerjola, the combined team giving you Africa Global Business COVID-19 sporting activities, everything you need this morning on the breakfast show, on the morning show, I should say. Stay with us. Right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. It's time to talk to our dependable Ruth Zudiri. Everything business. It's your business, Rutus. Go ahead.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor, and good morning, Tundu. We kick things off with the Central Bank of Nigeria. They've released a new circular that talks about the payment service systems. Essentially, it's new license categories for the payment service system. As you know, they recently just handed out payment service bank licenses to banks that want to play in that arena. And as you can see there on that page 1, they have a new licensing categories for the Nigerian payment system. So of the 4 categories they've got switching and processing, they've got mobile money operators, which is MMO, payment solution services, and regulatory sandbox. So essentially, those are 4 broad categories within where these players are going to play in. Interestingly enough, they said that the only one of those categories that can handle money is the mobile money operators. They also said that if any companies want to combine switching and mobile money operations, they need to be in a holdco structure where the subsidiaries are the ones that will handle those different areas, so there's no commingling. They also said that, in order for any collaborations to take place between payment service banks and existing banks, permission has to be taken from the central bank. Existing payment service operators have until, I believe, June of 2021 to be able to fall in line with these new regulations. And then new payment service operators that are coming into the space that have an approval in principle, they have to align with this immediately. So this is pretty much just the central bank evolving with the new understanding what the new space is with regards to the payment service arena, and putting regulation in place in order to make sure that everybody's playing by the rules. We move next to the World Bank. They just released their update, Nigeria Development Updates. There it is, rising to the challenge, Nigeria's COVID response. And, well, I mean, look, they are still seeing Nigeria contracting by 4% or 4.4% or so in 2020. That's GDP. Growing at maybe 1.1% in 2021. But, there's a number of things that the World Bank looked at that we already know. And I think the theme for me today is urgency on the part of the federal government, because they're telling us things that we already know. And the issue here is whether or not the federal government is treating this as urgently as it should. Take oil and gas, for instance. Yeah, in the section of the oil and gas sector that they looked at, they of course repeated the fact that oil and gas accounts for about 80% of our exports. We all were here when we talked about the Q3 foreign trade statistics. 80% of our exports, about 50% of government's consolidated revenues for government, about 30% of bank credit. They also even said that the non-oil sector depends on the oil and gas sector when it comes to, as far as depending on them for revenues in order to support them. So even the non-oil sector depends on revenues coming from oil and gas. So the question now is, how urgent in 2020 December going into 2021, how urgent is the federal government treating diversification of Nigeria's revenues away from oil? Honestly, I can't confidently say that we're doing that, because the dependence is still so heavy, even in the oil and gas sector. So again, the World Bank was just repeating that Nigeria is still too reliant on oil. From there, they also talked about dollar remittances, and here's something that Doctor even mentioned when we talked about remittances. Remember, the central bank had their new liberalization policy where you can essentially receive remittances from overseas in FX cash. Well, the World Bank, and again, Doctor said this, the source of remittance is under pressure, in that our brothers and sisters that are over in the diaspora are also suffering job losses and suffering pressure on their incomes. The latest US jobs reports just came out. I talked about it with Michael Wilson yesterday. And in that jobs report, it spiked to 850,000. Economists were looking at 727,30. So COVID-19, lockdowns, resurgence of cases is putting pressure on jobs in the United States. And as the World Bank pointed out, the highest concentration of Nigerians in the diaspora are in North America and in Europe. And both Europe and North America both facing pressures from COVID-19. So the remittances that are coming here are essentially going to be under pressure. And so you want to ask yourself, while this is a good move from the central bank, is it too late considering where we are right now and how they are under pressure? Then agriculture. Here's a quote from the World Bank on agriculture. Look at this. They said, before COVID-19, emphasis, before, rising food prices were already under pressure on inflation due to insecurity in the north, conflicts between farmers and herders in the middle belt, and Nigeria's closure of the land borders since August 2019. Then on top of these, pandemic-related disruptions in the value chains and production processes further increased inflation. NDU is Nigerian Development Updates 2020. So again, I asked the question, has the federal government treated the border issue with urgency? Because food prices are still under pressure. they are still heavily under pressure. So it's one of these cases where you have to ask yourself, when are these borders going to be reopened? The President Buhari has said that, it's possibly going to be in soon. Minister of Agric has said they are not going to be open. Minister of Finance has said they will be open. So again, they are pointing to pressures that existed before COVID-19. So again, these are things we already know. How urgent is the government treating it? Finally, Google just released search trends for 2020 for around the world. For Nigeria, the top items that were searched for, look on the left, you'll see that number 5 is ASU on the left when you looked at the top searches. On the right-hand side, you look at the top questions that Nigerians are asking. Look at number 2, when is school resuming? We talked about ASU here. In fact, you should, on the back pages of last week's This Day, our sister publication, This Day newspaper, Shaka Modu, editor of the Sunday paper, has an article titled Academic Staff Union. The ASU has outlived its shelf life. The government is at fault for not reforming ASU up to standard. They've continuously held this country to ransom with regards to the impact on the education sector. And you can see again, yet in 2020, that it's another top, along with Joe Biden, Corona, and other things. It's another top search item in Nigeria for the year 2020.
Pertinent the issue is, Rotus, but I really want to talk about those reports you churned out. So there's a school of thought among some people and some thinkers that coronavirus, and it's a very controversial statement, so wait for it. You wouldn't like it when you hear it, I can assure you, Rotus, that coronavirus is not even it's not really a black swan event. The economies were already on the brink before coronavirus happened. It just increased those fault lines. And I'll say the same for us in this country. Because, it's so easy to blame coronavirus for many things and all of that. Corona did this. He took his own punch out of the economy. But the economy was already on its knees. We had shut our borders down since last year. There was mixed messaging. Somebody was saying the other day that I don't even know who to listen to in Nigeria. The president now is saying, we might open the borders soon. I thought the Minister of Agriculture said the other day they're going to shut the borders, throw the key into the sea. Maybe they'll probably bring the key out of the sea to come open the border. So you don't know who to talk to. There's insecurity situation. There's strife in the Middle Belt. The food basket of this country. Constant fightings. Farmers can't go out there. You saw what happened to 43 farmers and the likes. So we've had all of this happening before. And really, please, because I know the reaction very soon will be, these people are doomsayers. They're saying all the negative things about Nigeria. Really, for once, I want us to really just take this report and introspect. I believe that if we start to take this report and introspect and look at the areas we can develop on, it will really help us a great deal. Rather than this, your world against my fight, this constant rebuttals and everything. If they are telling you that the economic indices is bad, it is best we really look at it. Because really, look at it on the lives of the people.
I read that report as grim as it was, and exactly like Rufai just said, I thought presidential rebuttal coming in 5, 4, 3. Somebody's going to come and just dismiss it. Because they're trying to assure us that we'll exit this recession Q1 2021. This report says it might linger till 2023. That is actually pretty horrific.
Well, and that's quite realistic. Well, quickly, first on the Google report about key issues in Nigeria, about ASU, and also concerns about when schools will resume. I think that, that is quite, a no-brainer in the real sense of it, because so many families are affected, even families that do not have their children attending Nigerian universities or public universities probably know someone who has children there. And then many of the young persons who are at home, they have anxiety about their future. So you are likely to find that coming up on Google search. More so, as the government and ASU are not making much progress with their negotiations. And then you have all the other unions within the university system, SANU, NASU. And after about 7 or 8 months, and after more than 7 meetings between government and university officials, I think, the concern being expressed and the fact that people are perpetually searching for the latest should not be surprising. Unfortunately, as at this week, further discussions over revitalization fund and payment of earned allowances are run into a ditch because ASU is still insisting that government must demonstrate good faith by paying the arrears before ASU branches can take a unanimous position on whether schools should reopen or not. Today and tomorrow, I understand they are going to have further discussions on the 2009 agreement, which the university teachers insist that, is also very important. How much progress will be made with that, we're not sure. So at some point, the major stakeholders involved will just have to place the public interest first. But the university teachers insist that, well, public interest also means that they are workers and they have families and they need to survive. So all of these issues, let's just say as public, as the Nigerian public, continue to raise the basic issues and put pressure on all the stakeholders to act in the public interest. You raise the issue about the CBN. Now, the CBN has a responsibility to ensure the stability of the financial system. But with regard to the payment system, payment service system, now, this is not new. There had been an existing, regulatory framework on payment services. Now, how is this secular? How does it depart from the existing regulatory framework? And how does that affect us, as well, I guess we are all stakeholders in the financial system of Nigeria, even if your account doesn't have anything more than 10,000 naira. So what are the points of departure and how are we affected in any way?
Right, thank you so much, Rotus, for that. We go up to Michael. I'll probably get some updates on the grown-ups having a botched dinner in the room. Michael, over to you. Good morning.
Good morning. I'll come on to that. Let me run through the other markets first, and we'll get on to that dinner later on. As well as the that wonderful pudding that we were talking about the other day. In Asia, new US restrictions. That's the one. US restrictions on China telco companies have seen mainland market retreats today. The reality strikes that the relations between the two superpowers is as bad as ever. Shanghai Composite down about 1%. Hong Kong a slight gain. Japan falling 0.5%. Alongside really basically what was happening in across the pond on Wall Street basically. So as far as the United States is concerned, that incredible IPO, the stock market launch of Airbnb, another 100% gain, its shares doubling on the day, market capitalization over $100 billion. So somebody will have gone home happy last night. If nothing else, it shows how much retail investors are actually wanting to get on board the sort of vaccine euphoria train of where stocks are going. I always feel that if you're getting on the back of a wave that's cresting, you're probably slightly too late. But then again, I was never that good surfer, so we'll see. As far as yesterday was concerned, Reuters touched on this, the jobless claims, they spiked up yesterday in the United States, at least the weekly ones, to 853,000. Manufacturing jobs held up nicely. Government jobs, obviously since the election, fell very slightly. But with no stimulus program agreed, it looks as though the markets are clearly spooked by that, and I suspect that's how they're going to end the year. The US has been busy, as I said, on the US geopolitical front. It's announced sanctions over its NATO partner, Turkey, because Turkey bought a Russian air defense system. Additionally, now here's the China thing. The US Federal Communications Commission ordered the removal of Huawei telecommunications equipment from US carriers, and it's also reviewing China Telecom's stroke America's, in other words, the American arm of China Telecom, its permission to operate in the United States. And also, so China was halted visa-free access to Hong Kong and Macau for US diplomatic passport holders. So that'll be a nice, delicate job. Trump's not going quietly, and Joe Biden will have a full intro when he actually gets in there next month. As far as the EU, ECB and all that's concerned, Germany, steady as she goes, their industrial outlook looked quite good. As far as the European Central Bank is concerned, they left interest rates on hold, but they did, as predicted, extend their pandemic relief programme right through into the year after next. And they also did the same with cheap loans for banks as well. Christine Lagarde was suitably cautious about the economic outlook, but we have to say COVID-19 second wave, France has reintroduced a lot of restrictions there, and so the euro shrugged off what the ECB had said, but that will be an interesting thing to watch over the first few days, not least of which because of our favourite subject, Brexit. And Britain and the European Union appear to be saying, as one market commentator said to me this morning, yes to the mess. Neither side seems willing to cross the gap between them to get a trade deal done. Are still posturing on both sides. Still is differing about fisheries. Still differing about state aid and so on. At least what the EU have done, God bless them, they have actually outlined a number of contingency plans or mini deals which deal with aviation, hauliers coming across the channel and things like that. To try to ensure there's no disruption on January the 1st. We still, or rather the UK still has to reply to all that. The Prime Minister here has put Britain on notice for a no deal, saying that he was sceptical about the prospect of an agreement. And I think more and more people are not thinking this is grandstanding. They're thinking this is probably quite close to the truth. So dark days really ahead. Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, will be speaking later this morning. They'll be talking about the financial stability report. They do this regularly as far as the Bank of England is concerned. But what he's actually going to say is that it's the pandemic that's done the damage, and no trade deal, no trade Brexit deal can actually be handled. But it's the pandemic that's done it, and it's done a lot more damage there. And the Bank of England has said that banks can start issuing dividends again. Bank shares can start issuing dividends again. Not quite sure why he's said that, but I mean that I think is a degree of confidence in what's going on in the economy. He may be seeing it. Have to say, most people around me are not doing that. The Luxembourg Prime Minister, Xavier Bettel, ever heard of him? No, neither have I. Said that he's said that Britain is headed for a dark hole. He's conveniently forgetting, of course, that the European continent is suffering from the same pandemic, and we will at least have extra stability to be able to get over an economic shock, should we so wish. Sunday, then, the deadline for negotiations. It's going to be fun in the office on Monday morning as far as currency dealers are concerned, because obviously they'll be following the progress of sterling. Finally, commodities, Brent crude. You were talking about your dependence upon the oil price. It's above $50. Brent's above $50 a barrel at least. And gold, well, it's consolidated really after a fairly torrid week, but who knows where risk is going to be on Monday morning. It's going to be a busy weekend. That's the global view.
Well, Michael, thank you very much. But two quick issues. First, I'd like you to comment further on a subject you brought up earlier in the week. That's the Facebook issue and the unanimous decision to go after Facebook and break up the monopoly. Is it as straightforward as both Congress and other anti-Facebook stakeholders seem to make it? That's one. And then two, the European Union meeting, the European Commission meeting. We're told that they've been able to resolve the standoff with Poland and Hungary. What are the implications? What are the details of the deal? And have they really been able to resolve it, considering the point about Hungary and Poland respecting certain rules of engagement?
Facebook first, then. I think it is facing its Standard Oil moment, but they are going to very, very stiffly defend themselves. No question about. They're saying that the Instagram deal, which is the one that they're looking at, and also the WhatsApp deal, these happened a long time ago. The most recent was 2014. Which in our kind of terms is a long. It's almost nearly a generation ago, isn't it? Six years ago. It's a long time before all the pandemic and everything like that. Will it be broken up? What Facebook's argument, the central argument, will be is that antitrust legislation is there to protect the consumer. It's not to stifle successful businesses. Is Facebook successful? I would say 1 billion users a month is pretty successful. Do people hate it because it's big? Yes, they do. Do they hate it because Zuckerberg has already said, not actually contested, the fact that the regulators are saying they either buy or bury their competitors? So there's pretty strong words going around. As I said yesterday, I feel as though there will be some sort of resolution about it. Whether it'll be broke up, I'm not quite sure. I suspect it probably will be, but it's a long time to come. And the only people making money out of this are the lawyers. As far as the European Union's concerned, I'm glad that they came to some kind of agreement with Poland and Hungary, because they were quite rightly questioning the distribution of the pandemic relief fund. And why wouldn't they? They are member states. They can do what they like. Were they going to veto it? Yes, they were. Were they brought round? Yes, they were. The details of it not forthcoming yet, but I think it's a good thing for the EU. As far as the rest of the world's concerned, not quite sure about that, because I feel that because there's no political union in the United States, why haven't member states got a right to question decisions taken over their heads? That's what we call democracy. It's very painful and it's very awkward, but that's the way it is. Either you have that or you have an authoritarian European Commission. I know that the bureaucrats would like that in Brussels because they're non-elected technocrats. That's what they do for a living, and that's why they get paid a lot. That's why they get paid a lot of money.
Okay, Michael, real quickly, I just quickly want to talk about Brian Chesky's Airbnb. Great job he's done. Started the company after the Democratic Convention in 2008, has done well for himself. But can you assure me that this will not be another Snapchat IPO? Because we also had great expectation for Snapchat, and we saw how Snapchat went.
Yes. So what the problem with this is that these aren't proper times, are they? As I said, the retail investors seem to have kind of got involved because they don't want to miss out on anything. So where its share price actually settles is anybody's guess. Will it suffer the same? I mean, it's getting big. $100 billion is a big market capitalization, and by any stretch of the imagination, will it start to take over? Will it suffer a breakup in the same way that Facebook has? We're moving in different times now, and these are different kind of online industries. The whole shape of the industrial world is changing very, very rapidly indeed. I'd like to see how the share price settles before I answer your question directly, because I just don't know. I mean, an IPO is one thing. The actual first day of trading is one thing. How it actually pans out. But at least, and this is the important thing, I think, as opposed to a lot of these kind of tech IPOs, Airbnb did actually show a marginal profit. So you have something upon which to kick the tires, if I can put it like that, before you actually decide whether you're going to invest in the company. So I think, as far as it's concerned, sort of yes to your question, but I do feel as though we should wait and see how the share price settles.
All right, there goes the story of Air Bed and Breakfast on a breakfast show like this, the morning show right here. Thank you so much for your time. COVID-19 pandemic is raging around the world. Adesua brings everything down with good reportage. Adesua, how are you doing? Good morning.
Keep our viewers abreast of the development with the pandemic globally. First, let's look at the statistics. Good morning, Dr. Bati and Tundu as well. Good morning. Let's look at those numbers this morning. According to the Johns Hopkins University, 69 million, very close to the 70 million mark. And we're also seeing an uptick of deaths as well from some countries. Like I said yesterday, it depends on where you're looking at. Some countries are having a grip on the pandemic. They are ahead of the pandemic because of measures, collaboration, and advice that the people are taking from their government, while others are falling behind the pandemic despite initial measures they've put in place. And such a country like Nigeria, let's begin with Nigeria today. We recorded 675 cases yesterday. That's pretty high. It's been a long time we've been seeing such numbers. Dr. Abati, you talked about the PTF meeting yesterday where they talked about, they blamed religious houses for large gatherings and flouting protocols. But again, the buck stops at the state government, doorstep. They have dropped the ball. They have been caught napping because they have refused to enforce these protocols. The PTF is also concerned about the rising numbers that we are seeing, and they've put all isolations that were closed earlier back on standby to reopen. According to the Minister of Health, the increase we are seeing are from local transmission and from travelers who are returning to the country. Now, that is worrisome because we know that the protocol in place for Nigeria is that you have to do a PCR test before you come into the country, and you have to have paid on the portal to take another PCR test between 7 and 14 days. So you wonder how we are having those numbers numbers of returning travelers turning positive if they had done PCR tests before they boarded to come to Nigeria and PCR tests when they come to Nigeria. So that is worrisome there. On the issue of vaccines, we've talked about this a lot. What is Nigeria doing? What is Africa doing? Well, the PTF yesterday said they are looking beyond COVAX to get vaccines for Nigerians. They are also reiterating that they must be safe, they must be efficient, and they'll be subjected to local authorities to test them as well. And Africa, the head of the Africa CDC, is quite irritated by wealthy countries stockpiling vaccines. Mr. Ikengasong called the situation a moral issue, and he urged the United Nations to summon a special session to discuss the ethical and fair distribution of vaccines to avoid what he says is the North-South distrust in respect to vaccines. He's appealing to countries with excess doses to give them to COVAX, or countries in need. He says there's the need for global cooperation, global solidarity, and not COVID nationalism that we'll talk so much about. His remarks are coming a day after a report released by the People's Vaccine Alliance warning that as many as 90% of the population in dozens of poorer countries will miss out on coronavirus vaccines next year. Let's go to the U.S. now, where the U.S. government has given, or U.S. government panel has given a green light to Pfizer vaccine for use. The advisory panel voted 17-4 with one abstention in favor of the decision. Depending on how fast the FDA signs off on the panel's recommendation, a lot of people say that the FDA would actually go ahead with this recommendation. It is expected to do so, and the jabs would be rolled out within days in the United States. Pfizer is saying as soon as the FDA gives this go-ahead, they are ready to roll out 6.4 million doses in 24 hours. Now, this endorsement is also coming despite questions about allergic reactions in the UK in those two health workers. The FDA was also expected to review 3 more vaccines next week. The US is the most impacted country by the coronavirus in the world as regards cases and deaths. And this may also seem dramatic, but China, away from the US, China is advising that flight attendants actually wear disposable diapers and avoid restrooms at all costs on flights serving countries with high rates of coronavirus cases, such as the US. Now, this technical guideline also states that flights and cabin crew should, on lower risk flights, designate a private laboratory for crew and sanitize it before and after each use. I think that for those who travel by air, it is prudent to assume that restrooms on airplanes carry lots of germs. There was a case of a woman who traveled from Italy to South Korea in August. She contracted coronavirus during her trip, and the only place on that trip where she didn't wear a mask was in a bathroom, and researchers are saying that is probably where she got it from. And finally, guys, some news just in from Australia. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has announced that a local production for vaccine has had to be terminated amid concerns that it could interfere with HIV diagnosis. The company will now instead produce more units of rival vaccine, AstraZeneca, instead. The bits I've gotten from this story, I'll probably bring it to you next week as it develops, but the bits I've gotten from it is that the makeup of the vaccine has HIV, a bit of HIV put into it, and so when it was used on participants, it was bringing out false positive results. So that's a huge concern, and we'll always say it, we cannot alter safety, we cannot sacrifice safety on the altar of speed when it comes to vaccines, especially as we are seeing a lot of people who are skeptical about taking vaccines. We need to improve public confidence, and I think that Australia has gone the brave way to cancel this production.
They're amazing to do that. This is the kind of transparency that we need. And you're right, I was reading and watching a video about how vaccines work. The molecular clamp is what has been referred to. They used an HIV protein to mimic one of the 29 proteins in the COVID spike. and present it to the body in a way that will now boost the body's immunity to fight it. But it's now giving false positive HIV test results, which is unfortunate. Australia had committed, they'd already pre-ordered 51 million doses back in October. And even at that point, they're still not afraid to cancel that order and come clean. And I think that should really be commended. And I'll leave it at that. I know the gentleman next to me want to say something here.
The one Australia Council.
I know you do.
First, let me start from the serious to the comical. Well, in quotes. First, Pfizer. I think that the endorsement of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine candidate by the Committee of Independent Advisors put together by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration yesterday, it's a good development for Pfizer. They endorsed it. They said there are no serious safety concerns. They said it's about 95% effective, which is consistent with the position of the UK, which was the first to authorize the use of the vaccine, followed by Bahrain, followed by Canada, and also followed by Saudi Arabia. The indication is that as early as next week, after another meeting that is likely to take place this weekend of a committee of the Centers for Disease Control, we could have, the United States beginning to, administer the Pfizer vaccine. But the concerns remain about the side effects. One, what they call anaphylaxis, or, the adrenaline, people with adrenaline problems using EpiPen, that was observed in 2 persons in the United Kingdom. There's also been a report about what they call facial palsy in the United States. But what has been said is that if you look at the positives outweigh the negatives. In other words, the benefit of the vaccine is more than the risks involved. And I think that that is something that sounds encouraging. However, the big problem that has emerged now is racism around medical solutions, particularly in the United States. Blacks and Latinos, in a study that was conducted, are saying that they are not interested in taking any vaccine because they really don't know the truth about it, that there may be racial politics involved. And you really cannot blame Black Americans. You remember the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Yes. And that's why Dr. Anthony Fauci had to come out yesterday to say that, look, Black Americans are in fact involved. His brothers and sisters, in the search for the vaccine, particularly with the first effort by Moderna. And 2 doctors were named, Dr. Kizzy and Dr. Graham, who are Black persons. But whether that would eliminate the racial bias is another thing entirely. Now, you talked about diapers, the Chinese technical guidelines for epidemic prevention and control. Well, the way it looks now, I hope we won't get to a point where every air travel will begin to look like space travel. And with the cabin crew wearing diapers all over the place, it will just be a matter of time before they ask passengers to also start wearing diapers. And I hope, I try to imagine what kind of situation that will present all of us with. Well, speaking for myself, maybe it's better to just wait until diapers are no longer compulsory safety elements in air travel. As for Nigeria, I think, look, we just have to wake up. We're talking about Africa CDC, Nigeria, we're both talking about relying on charity. And I have said it consistently that charity will not probably solve our problem. Nigeria is saying 20 million doses of vaccines may arrive early next year. 20 million doses of vaccines for a population of 206 million. And that 20 million doses will probably come from the COVAX alliance. Why don't you follow the example of Argentina and probably introduce a millionaire's tax? I mean, all these rich people, who have more money than they need, they can give more to the Nigerian government. Even WHO is looking for money. They are not getting enough money, but they are still making the effort. The Africa CDC is liaising with Afrexim Bank to raise about $5 billion. They are still looking for money. So individual countries in Africa should not be looking up to charity. Even charity these days is complaining that COVID-19 is a problem. So we have to think of more creative solutions.
I mean, well said, Dr. Abati. So, maybe, Tundu, great point you made. Real quickly, I just want to ask, that order Australia is cancelling, can't they just be charitable enough to help us out?
Do you want HIV false positives? I don't think you do.
You know, because at least false positive is better than nothing.
That.
Nobody wants that.
It's only phase 1 of the trial that it's passed, so I don't think we want that.
So we don't want that. Okay. Secondly, I just want to beg in advance. I want to beg in advance for next year. God, sparing our lives to next year. Please. Don't hoard vaccines when that 20 million doses come. I beg you. This is a public service announcement. Please, don't hoard those vaccines.
Well, you probably get an invoice for that.
Please.
If it's a PSA.
For me, okay, anyway. Don't hoard vaccines. Let Nigerians get it. Nigerians that are in dire need of vaccines. Yes. Because we don't want to see the case where a lot of Nigerians will need vaccines and the vaccines will be separated and kept apart for some VIPs. We know it happens. Please, don't do it. This is not the time to do it. Everybody needs to stay alive. The vaccines are there so that all of us will take them and build herd immunity. And when herd immunity comes, we can all move around boldly and say, okay, we are well on our way to fighting it. But please, for whatever reason, don't hoard it. It's supposed to be taken by people. Thank you so much.